And today, we are very fortunate to have with us the one of the newest SWS fellow to give us a talk about the statistics and econometrics of charter change. Just to introduce our speaker, Dr. JC Punongbayan is an assistant professor at the University of the Philippines School of Economics. He earned his PhD from UP School of Economics in 2021, where he also graduated summa cum laude and valedictorian in 2009. He was awarded the Jose Encarnacion Jr. Award for Excellence in Economics and the Gerardo P. Sicat Award for Best Undergraduate Thesis. He previously worked at the Securities and Exchange Commission, the World Bank Office in Manila, the FEU Public Policy Center, and the National Economic and Development Authority. His current research interests are macroeconomics, Philippine economic history, education, economics, and development economics. Prof. JC writes weekly economic columns for Rappler.com. He is also co-founder of Usapang Econ and co-host of Usapang Econ podcast. In 2023, his book, False Nostalgia, The Marcos Golden Era Myths and How to Debunk Them, was published by Ateneo de Manila University Press. And in 2024, he was one of the honorees of the Outstanding Young Men Award. Uh, yes. So please welcome Dr. JC Punongbayan.
Hello. Hello. Good afternoon po sa inyong lahat. Thank you very much for coming over. Kita ko ang dami nating participants from Zoom. Thank you for coming as well. Sige po, magsiset up lang ako dahil I need to share my screen. Parang klase lang pala to na I need to share my screen. Teka lang. Okay. Ayan, nakikita na po ba? Okay, so magkabilang side. Ay, okay, sige po. For the Zoom participants, can you see the slides? Thumbs up. Ayun, si Sir Steven. Meron siyang thumbs up. Okay, so thank you again very much for inviting me this afternoon. I will time myself, so I'm looking at the clock. We have more time for the Q&A. First of all, let me thank you, Sir Mahar, for inviting me in the first place to be the newest SWS fellow. It's a huge privilege, sir. Thank you so much. Ayun po, happy to join the SWS family. Okay, this afternoon I will be talking about a very hot issue. As you know, some of us at the UP School of Economics have written extensively on this and also appeared in various public fora about the economics of charter change. Many voices have already chimed in on this topic, but we argue that we need a more nuanced appreciation of the data. So many of the debates concerning economic charter change actually center on the data, maybe more than Filipinos know. So it pays to really look at the numbers and parse the statistics on economic charter change. The first thing to say is that, of course, we didn't really see that this would be a big issue. I mean, I myself was quite surprised that it kind of escalated to this level because President Bongbong Marcos himself was of two minds about economic charter change. Just last year, he said that it's not a priority for him. And then 1 year later, it suddenly is. It elevated to the level of discussion that we are at right now. Okay, maybe just a few remarks about the pros and cons of economic charter change. Because we're a diverse group here. So before we dive into the numbers, maybe we can have a check on the pros and cons. So just like any other public policy, economic charter change has its own share of pros and cons. And that's one of the hallmarks of economic thinking. For everything, there are pros and there are cons. So let's look at the pros first. I think it's quite intuitive that when we tinker with the 1987 Constitution, there's a possibility that it will indeed make the Philippine economy more open to foreign investments. So dating as far back as the 1930s, and then with Filipino First policy, many of the past constitutions have contained protectionist policies that have had some sort of adversarial outlook or adversarial attitude toward foreign investments in many sectors of our economy. So we are many of those remnants of the past constitutions are still with us in the 1987 Constitution, and some argue that maybe this is the source of the bottleneck, or maybe this is the bottleneck when it comes to foreign investments in the country. And then, of course, you know that over time, the Philippine economy has globalized intensively in terms of total exports and imports. Our share of trade to GDP has gone up significantly, and this will help improve that over time. Um, Over time, you can also see that there have been waves of foreign direct investments in the Philippines. So if you play around with the data coming from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, you will see a steep rise of FDIs broken down into its three main components: equity, reinvestment of earnings, and debt instruments. From about 2010, so throughout the 2010s, you can see the steep rise of FDIs. And then you can see the declines from 2017, 2018, 2019, and then the pandemic. It's here. And then you have a sudden peak of FDIs in 2021, and then we're on the downtrend again. So even with the supposed restrictions in the 1987 Constitution, we have had waves of FDI. But I think the question is, how can we further increase the inflow of foreign direct investments, and will economic charter change be the key to that? Of course, the second pro is that we should acknowledge that the Philippines is not a very good saver. Okay? Filipinos are not good savers, and we need much more savings so that we can invest more. If we are not investing so much, that is possibly because we're not good savers. So the thinking is that if we allow in more investments coming from abroad, that will complement the dearth of investments here in the Philippines. So when you look at the savings rate of the Philippines, for example, it's quite low when you look at the share of gross domestic saving in nominal GDP. For example, you will see that the purple trend here would be the Philippines, and you can see that it's quite low compared to many of our neighboring Asian neighbors. Neighboring Asian countries. And of course, this partly stems from the fact that the Philippine economy is a consumption-driven economy. About 2/3 of our GDP is easily spent on consumption, and saving does not, magaling tayong gumastos, in other words. Pero pagdating sa saving ay kulang tayo, and that's one of the factors behind the low investment rates as well in the Philippines. So again, the thinking is that if we are not good savers here in the Philippines, maybe we can augment that or make up for that by allowing in more investments coming from abroad, including, for example, investments in infrastructure, manufacturing, and other key sectors of the economy. Another manifestation of our poor saving rate would be the huge and, in fact, arguably ballooning current account deficit of the Philippines. So basically, the current account is a measure in open economy macroeconomics that captures, for the most part, exports minus imports. But over the past years, we have been importing more than we are exporting. And that has manifested in the huge current account deficit in recent years. Dati, malalaki yung ating current account surpluses. And this is because of the strong inflows of OFW remittances, yung mga dollar earners natin from abroad. And then, of course, in certain sectors that have benefited from tremendous growth, including the business process outsourcing sector, another huge dollar earner for the Philippine economy. So before, we had huge current account surpluses and balance of payment surpluses as well. But the table has turned, and in more recent years, you can see that nasa negative na po yung ating, especially yung current account. And that is a manifestation of the fact that we have become, in recent years, net importer from the rest of the world and also a net borrower from the rest of the world. Kasi magkaugnay po yung extent of our net exports as well as yung amount of savings. Okay, so there are arguably pros to economic charter change, but there are cons as well, including the fact that actually the Philippine economy has been long open to foreign investments. And the 1987 Constitution, notwithstanding many of its restrictive provisions, has already opened up the economy for a long time. For example, in sectors like manufacturing and power, foreign investments are very free to enter these and many other sectors. And then on top of that, Congress has also passed many laws that aim to further liberalize investments even without changing or touching the Constitution, including the Ease of Doing Business Act of 2018, the Retail Trade Liberalization Act, the FDI Act, Create Law, and amendments to the Public Service Act. And then more recently, the Department of Energy has also loosened its restrictions on renewable energy investments. So across all of these laws, Congress has already done its homework. But the question is, why aren't foreign investments actually coming in despite the supposedly more open business sector in the Philippines? And the question is it because of the Constitution or is it because of other things? So that's what we're going to discuss later. So the implication of the statement that the Philippine economy has already opened up significantly is that Congress right now is hard put to identify sectors that it needs to open up further. Kaya doon po sa resolution of both houses ng Congress, you will see there that they are only actually aiming to touch on few sectors of the economy. Namely, aning tatlong sectors na yun, education, specifically higher education is not even the entire education sector. Ayaw nilang galawin yung basic education, it's just the higher education sector. Advertising, okay, and then public services. That's it. They're not touching the provisions about land ownership, about the practice of professions by foreigners, etc. So ito lang po yung gusto nilang galawin. And maybe that reflects the fact that bukas na nga yung marami mga sector natin. So very few na lang yung kailangan pang buksan. Now, the next question is, will opening up the Constitution for these specific sectors allow in a tsunami of foreign investments? Okay, again, going back to the idea that economic charter change is motivated by the need to bring in more investments and complement the low investment and saving rate in the Philippines. So we need to look at these specific sectors, including, for example, higher education. Baka pag matuloy yung economic charter change, baka meron ng Harvard Diliman or Harvard Malingap Street or siguro Stanford Caloocan branch. So ganun. Of course, coupling from the models in other countries na merong mga elite universities in the US, for example, setting up branches or partnering with Asian universities. So maybe that's what will happen when we open up higher education. So we don't have any issue at all when it comes to internationalization, which is good in principle. But we also need to ask, will foreign universities be incentivized enough to invest here in the Philippines when we open up the Constitution? Will that result in significant investments over time? And then, of course, we need to acknowledge the fact that the landscape of higher education has already changed tremendously in the past decades. If you want a graduate degree from MIT, for example, or any other elite US university, marami ng mga open courseware and other online programs that you can avail of. You don't even need to open up the Constitution and allow in more foreigners because Filipinos themselves can already access many of these programs if they want to. Okay? So that's also one of the things when it comes to advertising. Advertising has already changed as well in the sense that content creation can be done virtually anywhere in the world. And in fact, there are some statistics showing that more than half of ads are in the Philippines are actually done online. So you don't even need to open up the advertising sector. In fact, it has already been opened up and um, yun. So parang it's already quite needless to do economic charter change if you want to bring in advertisers from other countries. So of course, you need to go back to the idea of why did the Constitution bar foreign investments in advertising in the first place? Kasi, of course, before, nung wala pa namang internet, so yung mga advertisements are a way by which cultural influences can come into the country from other countries, di ba? Yung mga ads of Coca-Cola, for example, or other big brands from the US. So, again, that has already been made obsolete by the internet and the modern age. And in fact, all Filipinos can access virtually any type of content when they open up their phones. So again, that kind of tells you that this model of barring foreign investments in advertising is already quite obsolete. And then, of course, you have the issue of just how much investments can you expect in advertising. Uh, when you look at the ito pala, statement from the advertising sector, they say that foreign ownership won't affect the local ad industry. And let me read this. The developments in technology have changed the landscape insofar as job creation is concerned. In fact, Filipino talent works for foreign companies online. And the reverse is also true. Foreign talents are contributors to advertising content online. And technology has really changed the landscape compared to what it was in 1987. So already the advertisers themselves are saying that this is irrelevant to them already, what the Constitution says. And then here you can see some statistics gathered by the Philippine Statistics Authority showing you the share of advertising in GDP. Of course, as part of the other subsectors in the creative economy, advertising is lumped into this category right here. And maybe I haven't seen the exact numbers for advertising alone, but I would say that maybe it's just 1% of GDP. So it's not the driver of the Philippine economy by any means. So we need to look at its contribution as well and the contribution of investments that could come in here. And then public services. So just a few years ago in 2022, Congress already passed a law amending the Public Service Act that essentially allows or change the definition of a public service so that more investments from abroad can come in sectors like transportation, etc. However, this has been challenged in the Supreme Court and we are waiting for a decision on whether or not the amendments to the Public Service Act are constitutional or not. But again, we have to ask, even with this law already, why is it or what's the real constraint for investors when it comes to investing here in the Philippines? Again, many sectors have already been opened up, but why in these sectors where you can find public services, but why aren't they coming in? So that's what we will be discussing with the econometrics part of this. So is economic charter change necessary? When you weigh all of the evidence out there, I would say no for two main reasons. Number one, to begin with, there's weak appetite for charter change. And the second, as a preview, economic charter change is a terribly inefficient way if you just want to boost the economy. But let's just first focus on this first point. There's weak appetite for charter change. So for this, I rely on some old statistics coming from SWS. So Sir Leo shared with me this compilation of findings of SWS surveys regarding constitutional amendments. So I think the earliest data that we have here collected by SWS dates back in May 1986. So there was a question of whether the 1973 Constitution should be changed So again, this is just a few months after the EDSA People Power Revolution. And you can see here that 64% agreed with that statement that the 1973 Constitution should be changed. So this is a rare moment in our history wherein people really clamored for a change in the Constitution. And you can also see here in the right pie chart here that 57% or most of the respondents said that um, they have been following what has been going on in the drafting of the new 1987 Constitution. So many people were really invested in creating that new Constitution. But let's see how that has changed over time. And by the way, that those statistics remind me of a position paper of the UP Department of Political Science professors. I think Prof. Ella Atienza is here in Zoom. I saw her name. Hello po. So they came out with a statement and then they remarked on the timing of constitutional amendments. And they said there that while constitutional amendments may not require any special historical moments, revisions in practice were usually undertaken after some major upheavals like revolutions, coups, post-colonial wars, democratic uprisings, and post-peace agreement managed transitions. So in other words, the milieu during after the 1986 Constitution was quite perfect in the sense that people really wanted or clamored for a new constitution. However, absent these conditions of a major upheaval or a major change in the political order, it's quite difficult to rally people to change the constitution. Now, this is also interesting. From 1992 to 2011, you can see the proportion of adult respondents agreeing or not agreeing to the statement that constitutional provisions need to be changed, if there are any that needs to be changed. So in 2011, for example, 67% said that these changes are needless versus 33% who said yes. And then you can see it's quite stable over time. It hovers at a high rate over the span of many years. So this one, fast forward to 2008. So among people who agreed with charter change, 30% highlighted increases in foreign investments. And then 24% cited the adoption of a parliamentary system and 13% the adoption of a federal system. So it's also quite interesting how attitudes toward economic charter change have changed over time. And SWS has a very long history of collecting such type of data, which makes it very interesting. And then when you look at people's attitudes towards specific types of economic charter change, for example, proposals to loosen foreign restrictions on ownership of natural resources, land, and corporations, in 1986, only 9% wanted a higher share of foreigners in natural resources, for example. And then in 1998, 82% were not in favor of allowing foreigners to buy land for their residents here in the Philippines. So when it comes to land ownership, I think people are quite sensitive with that. And I think you can see that as well in the more current surveys. In 1999, about half of adult respondents disagreed with the proposal to allow foreigners to own land for industrial and commercial uses. 1999, 36% disagree with the proposal to allow 100% foreign ownership in corporations. So when it comes to foreigners owning corporations, owning land, Filipinos are quite resistant to that idea. But interestingly, in the 2000s, so for example, in 2004, I think you can, when you look at the statistics, you can get a sense that there are shifts in public opinion when it comes to this. So in 2004, 35% disagreed with a statement that there should be fewer legal restrictions on foreign investments. A little larger than that, 37% agreed. Okay, so maybe you can see there a change of public opinion on economic charter change in foreign restrictions. 2005, 43% yung green said it's a good time for charter change. Strongly agree and somewhat agree. Outnumbering those who disagreed with that statement. So it's quite interesting that there are those episodes where the balance tilts in the other direction. 2014, about a third of respondents disapproved with with amendments lessening restrictions on foreign participation in land ownership. 46% disapproved with lessening restrictions on mining ventures. So it's quite interesting that SWS has tracked public opinion when it comes to these specific sectors. And then this was is in public utilities. 38% agreed that we should lessen foreign restrictions in public utilities specifically, while only 27% disagreed. So pagdating sa public utilities, medyo mas lenient or parang mas in favor yung mga tao, at least marginally, compared to land, for example, or owning corporations. This one shows you data from 2005, 2006, and 2016, showing you the extent to which people approved with proposals to lessen restrictions on foreign participation. So you can see here a bit of an increase from 2006 to 10 years later of those who said who approved that we should lessen restrictions. But you can see as well the huge proportion of those who are quite undecided. Fast forward to the most recent, I think this is the most recent one, Sir Leo. So March 2023, okay, so just when there were renewed discussions on economic charter change, it's in the news again. So the public was mixed about the right time to amend the Constitution, with 27% saying it's not the right time to amend. So my time pala dapat dito. It's not the right time to amend the Constitution now. And then 33%, a bit larger proportion, it is the right time to amend the Constitution. And then you can see the very sizable share of those who are not decided on the issue. So I think ito yung nililigawan ng mga politiko who are pushing for economic charter change. And it's quite interesting to see na mas malaki itong green kesa dun sa red. But let's see how this changes in more recent surveys. Hopefully, SWS can update this survey and do another round on this using the same question. Now, interestingly, of course, when you ask people about charter change, it's also useful to contrast that with how much they know about the Constitution in the first place. Okay? Kasi if they're agreeing or disagreeing, but they don't actually know what the Constitution is, then I think, that tells you a lot about, or that gives you clues on what people really think about these issues. So interestingly, I saw in the compilation back in March 1987, just when right after the 1987 Constitution was ratified, 68% of respondents said that they have not read the Constitution. Okay. Even when it was mainit pa mula sa pugon ay kakaratify lang ng 1987 Constitution, but overwhelmingly 68% said that they have not read it. Okay. So and you can also see that over time. From 2002 up until 2016. Thank you. So you can see that in 2002, 60%. So plus 16. So 76% of respondents said they had little or almost no knowledge about the Constitution. But thankfully, you can see that over time, that has improved somewhat. Okay, so that fast forward to September 2016, ilan na to? So you have 53% saying that they have partial knowledge about the Constitution or extensive knowledge about it. So it was only in 2016 na majority of respondents said that they knew enough about the Constitution. Okay, so at least when we go into these economic charter change debates, we can have some confidence that at least people know a little bit more about the Constitution than they did many years ago. And then this one shows you, ayan, the most recent result, March 2023, what is the proportion of Filipinos who know about the Constitution? 17%, almost no knowledge. And then little knowledge, 45%. So majority of Filipinos have little to no knowledge about the Constitution. So hindi pala, so malaki pa rin pala yung, hindi alam ang Constitution to begin with. So yeah, I guess yeah, this is something that we really need to talk about because when people go around and ask for signatures, for example, for People's Initiative, people might not necessarily have the correct information when they do those signature drives, for example, as one implication of that. Okay, so much for the statistics. Well, we'll delve into even more statistics actually, but more from an econometric lens. Okay, so this goes to the second point I would want to make this afternoon, that aside from the fact that there is weak appetite for economic charter change, it is also arguably a very inefficient way of boosting the economy. Again, note in your mind that the overall objective of economic charter change is to boost the economy. The argument is that we're not growing nearly enough compared to our potential, etc. And this will be the solution for that kind of problem. However, it turns out to be inefficient, and there are arguably many other ways that could work more effectively to boost the economy. Okay? So on April 8th, nine of us at the UP School of Economics published this discussion paper. The title is How to Change a Constitution by Hand Waving or the Unbearable Lightness of Evidence in Support of Lifting Foreign Ownership Restrictions. So, of course, hand waving, basically that means basically a trick of magicians, diba? They want to distract you from what they're really doing and providing you an illusion. That is the subject of the magic trick. The same goes for economic charter change. Proponents are hand waving in the hope that people do not focus on the real issues and instead go with what is being said by many of the proponents. So this has generated an interesting discussion, especially with the Foundation for Economic Freedom, or FEF. So on April 16, a week later, they released a statement titled, Let's Change Our Anti-FDI History, a rejoinder to the UPSE discussion paper on charter change. And then we replied. Okay, so we had a counter rejoinder on April 24, simply titled Rejoinder. Okay, so by the way, my co-authors here would be Toby Monsod, Aleli Craft, Chelo Magno, Orville Solon, Elizabeth Tan, Ogie Arsenas, Florian Alburo, and Emmanuel De Jos. Last year, we also published something, by the way, about the Maharlika Investment Fund. So you may want to check that out as well. So what are the four main points of the UPSE discussion paper? The first is that lifting statutory foreign equity restrictions is not a necessary first step for increasing FDI or improving economic performance. The second, let's just go through this quickly. The potential effects on FDI for improving the efficiency of doing business or perceived corruption may be between 4 and 8 times more than the potential effect of lifting equity restrictions. So in other words, even if there is some empirical evidence to support the notion that if you loosen the constitution, that will bring in more investments, if you focus on other things like the ease of doing business or reducing perceived corruption, that can actually work wonders and work more effectively to bring in more investments. And that is a result of the econometric evidence based on papers that have been written on this issue. The third point is that the quality and appropriateness of FDI matter more than the quantity. This would be quantity. Okay, my bad. So we again nuance the discussions by saying that not all FDIs are created equally, and that some may in fact work wonders, but others may be actually detrimental. And it depends largely on the sector that you are focusing on, as well as on the type of FDI that you are talking about. The fourth is that given the Philippine political economy, the legislative flexibility proposed in resolution of both houses 6 and 7, while attractive on the surface, can be self-defeating since it also has the potential of increasing investment uncertainty. Okay, so this is an underappreciated point in the debates, wherein there are so many risks involved in economic charter change. It can, for example, open up discussions for political charter change, which will really throw us into a lot more chaos than we already are. And at the same time, even if they pass, for example, economic charter change, it will take some time, and uh, Congress will still have to craft laws that will allow in more investments in the above mentioned sectors. So, in other words, it's not something that will cure the lack of investments immediately. Okay, so in the discussion paper, we took some time to parse three papers that have been cited in the congressional debates about charter change. The first would be the paper by BSP economists Hazel Parcon Santos and her colleagues Amador and Romarate, published in 2021, ASEAN 5 countries in competition for FDI. You can also check that out from their website. The second paper would be by Rutger Lacaza, who is a former graduate student at UPSE and now working as an economist at the congressional, yung think tank nila doon sa Congress. Meron silang group of economists doon, and he wrote this paper, Impact of Regulatory Barriers on Inward FDI in ASEAN 5, an Augmented Gravity Model Approach. So this first paper was published without the economic charter change debate in mind. La Casa was published with the debate in mind. And then the third paper is Mistura and Roulé, The Determinants of FDI, Do Statutory Restrictions Matter? For this afternoon, I will just be focusing on 1 and 2 and not 3. 1 and 2 are the most heavily cited in the debates. Just to put a picture on the people we're talking about, this is Hazel Parcon Santos, who is a PhD economist working now at the BSP. And then this is Rutger Lacaza. But by the way, so both of them were called to testify or to give their statements in the congressional debates on economic charter change. And then you have, of course, Representative Stella Kimbo, a former colleague at the UP School of Economics, who is now representing the 2nd District of Marikina City. And she's also one of the proponents of economic charter change. So what do these three papers say? And in fact, you will find many similarities between them. And how do they establish empirical evidence for or against economic charter change? So all of the papers actually use the so-called equity index deriving from the OECD's Foreign Direct Investment Regulatory Restrictiveness Index as one of the explanatory variables. So when you do these regression studies, so you have a dependent variable, the Y variable, which, for example, it would be the inflows or outflows of foreign direct investments. And then you plug in a number of explanatory variables that try to explain that dependent variable. So one of the explanatory variables would be the equity index. So just to give a bit of a background, so the OECD came up with an index that measures how restrictive different countries are when it comes to investments. And the Philippines, in some respects, actually comes out as one of the most restrictive in terms of allowing in more foreign direct investments. So that's the main explanatory variable that were the subject of many of these studies. They also use an augmented gravity model. So why is it called a gravity model? So this is one instance of physics envy in economics. In other words, economists for the past century or so have been borrowing terms from the natural sciences like physics, like gravity. Okay, so as you know from high school physics, the gravity model by Newton. So the gravitational equation. Ano ba yung how do you explain the extent of gravitational force between two bodies like the Earth and the Sun, di ba? And the main, or in fact, the variables that he included there would be the mass of these bodies, like the mass of the Earth versus the mass of the Sun. And then you have yung distance between them. So the greater the mass between two heavenly bodies, the greater the gravitational force between them. And by the way, that applies not just to heavenly bodies, but to everything, including this glass of water, this bottle, etc. So the greater the mass, the greater the gravitational force. And then you have distance. So the farther away two bodies are, the weaker the gravitational force. So over time, economists have copied that model to try to explain the extent of trade between countries. So for example, yung Pilipinas and then South Korea versus Brazil, kanino tayo mas intensively makikipag-trade? Dun sa mas malapit sa atin, which is yung any Asian economy, for example. So the shorter the distance between the Philippines and another country, then the stronger the trade flows and investment flows that you can expect. And then the other determinant is that the bigger the country we're trading with, for example, China or the US versus Brunei, for example, you would expect greater trade between us and the US versus us and Brunei. Okay? Kasi mas malaki si US kaysa kay Brunei. Okay? So, that's exactly the intuition behind augmented gravity models. But it is called augmented because you are including other factors like the equity index, as well as corruption, as well as ease of doing business, etc. So that is why it is called the augmented gravity model. Okay? So in many of these, I will show you a bunch of numbers later on, but please do not be intimidated by the numbers. To help as a guide on how to read these numbers, when you look at a number, that will only tell you how much, if you increase x or increase or change x, how much does that change y? Okay, so that's how you read the numbers that I will flash you momentarily. So for example, if we relax the foreign equity restrictions in the Philippines by 1%, then, for example, we might see that investments, that is associated with 5% more investments coming into the country. Okay? So that is the essence of these econometric studies. Now, just to note as well that these studies look at correlation and not causation. So even when we're debating all of these, actually, in economics, yan po yung uso ngayon, studies on causal inference. To what extent can you actually say that Y is because of X and not just correlated with X? So ito pong mga studies na to focus on correlation and not causation. So going into the Parcon Santos paper first, so their dependent variable is outward FDI. Okay, so for example, the amount of FDI that goes out of Japan and into ASEAN 5 countries. And ano yung mga possible explanations for the outward FDI of any country? Of course, that includes the gravity variables. So real GDP as the measure of the size of host and source countries. And then you have geographical distance between capital cities. Okay? So ito yung sukat natin or proxy natin for the distance between any two trading countries or countries engaged in trade. And then you have a host of country factors, including corporate tax rates, the cost and quality of labor, macroeconomic stability, including inflation rates, and also the variable we're interested in, economic openness, which is captured by the equity index. Okay. Now, we also include variables such as the corruption perceptions index, the rule of law index, the ease of doing business index, and infrastructure. Okay. So basically, the thinking is that kung mas corrupt yung mga tao sa isang bansa, edi ayaw mag-invest ng mga tao doon. Okay? So ganun lang po yung sinasabi nito. Or kung walang rule of law, if the government can bend the laws and the rules to its favor at the detriment of investors, then you will expect fewer investors as well. Ease of doing business. Kung maraming permit masyado na kailangan para makapag-set up ng negosyo sa isang bansa, halimbawa sa Pilipinas, 'di ba, down to the barangay captain, dapat meron kang signature na makuha, otherwise wala kang barangay permit which you need to invest, then you will not invest here and instead invest in a place where there are fewer signatures you need to secure. Or if there are few infrastructure projects, hindi ka makatawid ng sa isang isla dahil walang mga sapat na investments or telecom investments as well, mahina internet. Okay, so doon ka na lang sa bansa na mas malakas yung internet at kumpleto yung kanyang road infrastructure. So yun lang po yung gusto nating malaman. Ano yung relative na importansya or what is the relative importance of all of these factors when explaining investments? yung economic openness, including the constitutional restrictions, are they important enough or big enough as a reason or a hindrance for investments compared to all of these other factors? So, titingnan po natin yung numbers and see if that is the case. Now, this one is one of the results coming from the Parcon-Santos study. So, if I may zoom in, baka masyadong maliit sa mga Zoom participants natin. Kaya bang mag-zoom in? Apparently, parang hindi po kaya. So, kayo na lang po mag-zoom in. I think you can zoom in from your end. You will see here the bunch of explanatory variables, okay, that we mentioned, including the equity index, corruption perception, EDB, which is ease of doing business. And then we will be looking at these numbers. So, just to give you an example of how to read this, so equity index, for example, ito pong highlighted in yellow, and then you look at column 5, for example. You see here the number minus 0.431. Okay, so what does that mean? So what this simply means is that if you relax the equity index, pinaluwag natin yung mga batas sa ating bansa by 1% as measured by the equity index, then you can expect that foreign direct investments, outward FDI, will be increasing by 0.43 percentage point. Okay? So put another way, if you relax the constitutional restrictions or legal restrictions by 10%, so you just multiply this by 10, so that is associated with an increase in FDI by 4.3%. Okay? So yun lang po yung ibig sabihin nito, and we're just comparing the relative magnitude of these different coefficients, okay, different elasticities. So it turns out, first and foremost, that the equity index is negative and statistically significant in models 1 and 2. Okay, itong first two columns na ito po. And a 10% reduction in the equity index is associated with an average of 5% increase in FDI outward position. So, meron namang mga kasi when you do econometric models, iba-iba, parang you try out different specifications. Minsan, idadagdag mo si corruption perception, and then you can see how these numbers change if you include, for example, corruption perceptions. So in other words, you are testing how robust the equity index is, the measured coefficient, if you include other explanatory variables. So meron namang mga ilang models like 1 and 2 where you see that the equity index has a statistically significant impact on outward FDI. However, it pales in comparison when you bring in other important factors that could possibly explain outward FDI. So, for example, when you train your sights on models 5 and 6, itong mga columns na ito, then you can see there that the equity index has a coefficient of 0.431 and 0.409. However, mas maliit po yan kumpara sa ease of doing business. Sinama na natin siya dito, which turns out to be 1.579 and then 1.510. So in other words, ang laki nung difference nung 1.579 sa 0.431. Okay? So kung i-divide nyo po yan, 1.579 divided by 0.431, if you can do that right now, you can do that with your phone, nalabas po siya na napakalaki niya compared doon sa effect of equity restriction. So in other words, parang mas effective pala. If you just want to bring in foreign direct investments, then you would have a greater chance of doing that if you improve the ease of doing business in the Philippines compared to relaxing the constitutional restrictions, for example. Okay, so this is the meat of the analysis right here. And you can see here that if you add other variables or subtract them, ang laki pa rin. The difference between ease of doing business in Model 6, 1.510, divide that by 0.409, then the effect of improving the ease of doing business is easily 3.7 times greater than the response associated with equity restrictions. Okay, so ito po yung meat of the analysis. Why we are saying that that relaxing the constitutional requirements is an inefficient way of improving outward FDI. In fact, there are other factors, including the ease of doing business, that could do a better job at that. Okay? If you include other things like the telecom index and the infra index, then FDI is even more responsive to these things compared to the equity index. So when you look at Model 9, for example, where we include the ease of doing business index right here, and then you include us at the same time telecom, okay, then you can see that ease of doing business has a coefficient of 1.835. Sorry, 834 versus 0.403. Okay, so easily, ang laki din po ng epekto, ang laki ng epekto ng ease of doing business if you include telecom. Okay, or if you include road infrastructure, then there's also a huge gap between 1.322 and 0.384. So, it doesn't look so exciting when you just look at these numbers, pero ito po yung battlefield right now when it comes to economic charter change debates. How big are the coefficients for equity index compared to other factors that may matter? Okay, so the effect is between 3.6 times to 4.6 times the effect of the equity index. The same goes for other models. So, for example, in Model 10, the equity index coefficient is statistically insignificant pa nga. Okay? So, in other words, statistically insignificant from zero ang effect ng equity index if you include ease of doing business as well as road infrastructure at the same time. So, by the way, the equity index is also insignificant in other models 4, 7, and 8 when you take into account rule of law, road quality, and telecom infrastructure. Now, again, the results are robust if you use an alternative equity restrictiveness index, not just the equity index, but all other factors included in OECD's restrictiveness index. So, in fact, nagiging statistically insignificant yung restrictiveness index in most of the specifications. So yun po yung meat nung analysis. And we will be comparing that with the analysis done by Lacasa 2023, which is quite similar. It's also an augmented gravity model. However, there are some interesting differences in terms of what variables were included or in fact excluded. Okay. So for example, Lacasa did not include the rule of law index, the ease of doing business index, and other infrastructure quality indices. They are not included. Okay, so you might question why he chose to exclude these otherwise important factors in explaining FDI. And also, merong a variable na, interestingly, common colonizer, okay, between two countries which are trading with one another. If they have a common colonizer, he added that. But the reason is not given. So we noted that there are no conceptual or practical justifications given for these modeling choices. Unlike Parcon Santos' paper, Lacasa also excluded Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, even if they accounted for 17% of total FDI in ASEAN during that period. So ito po yung results niya. So when you compare so this one is the Lacasa paper. So again, there's an equity index, 0.765. And then in the Parcon study earlier, it's 0.422 in one specification. So again, we want to compare his 0.765 coefficient with other factors. When you look, for example, at the corruption perception index in the Lacasa paper, 6.053. Okay, so ang laki po nung 6.053 compared to 0.765. So in other words, in fact, he is also supporting the notion that his results actually support the notion that if you fix corruption perceptions, it will do a better job of attracting FDI. Look as well at the human capital index. It's 10.85, which is so huge compared to 0.765 of the equity index. So in other words, FDIs are even more correlated with the extent of human capital in a country like education and health compared to the equity index. Okay? So ito yung mga pinagtatalunan po ng mga ekonomista sa ngayon kung gaano kalaki itong mga numbers na to compared to the equity index. Okay? In the congressional debates, so that it could be better understood by lawmakers, they came up with a back of the envelope calculation. Using the results of the La Casa paper, it was stated in the hearings that if we improve the foreign equity restrictions to the level of Vietnam, then that will be equivalent to an additional 323 billion pesos from the base amount of 600 billion of foreign direct investments. In other words, mas dadami daw po yung foreign direct investments and kapag magkaroon ng economic shorter change, and that is a projection coming from the econometric results. So just to show you the moment that happened, so I'm not sure if you can hear this. Teka, naririnig.
In that presentation, Mr. Lacasa stated that a 10% reduction in the restrictiveness index of the Philippines will result in, I believe, a 7.7% increase in FDIs. Is that correct, Mr. Lacasa?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so given that, tama ba na pwede tayong gumawa ng simpleng simulations na ibig sabihin, what happens if our restrictiveness levels will go to the level of Vietnam? Hindi naman bawal ang mangarap. So suppose inayos natin lahat ng problema natin at naging yung level of restrictiveness natin bumaba, mapunta sa level ng Vietnam, ano ang increase in FDIs natin? Ayon sa yung model.
Hello, everyone. So in CPBRD, we actually did a simulation. What if we ease our restriction, the Philippines equivalent to Vietnam? So currently, our equity restriction is 0.281, while Vietnam is 0.07. So if we reduce it to Vietnam, so that's equivalent to around 70% improvement in our index. So that's very substantial. And if we compute the effect, the improvement in FDI, that's equivalent to 6.7 billion US dollars, or in Philippine pesos, that's equivalent to around 330 billion pesos.
Okay, so malaki yun, no? Kasi ang current levels would be more or less about 600.
Yes, billion USD. Sorry, pesos, billion pesos.
Okay, so 330 billion peso increase over the base of 600 billion pesos.
Yes.
And dito sa model mo, you are controlling for factors such as infrastructure, tama ba?
Such as the macroeconomic factors, macroeconomic stability, quality of human capital, and so, yeah.
In other words, ito yung sinasabing other factors that impact on ease of doing business.
Yes, so the
Okay.
impact FDI.
Okay, so salamat.
Okay, so I guess we got the gist of it. So yun yung moment in the congressional hearings where they discussed the some of the most important results from the La Casa paper. And it has since been actually sounded off in other congressional hearings, even before the plenary hearings that happened. However, when you look at the statistics that La Casa was able to generate, we're actually wondering why he did not mention that if you fix the corruption perception index, for example, that can actually generate even more foreign direct investment. So in other words, there was some sort of cherry picking that happened, that they only highlighted the potential effects of equity restrictions on FDI, even if you can actually make an argument that improving human capital or fixing corruption perceptions could do a greater job of attracting FDI. So in other words, the effects could be easily 8 times compared to what he said, and that translates to about 40 billion pesos more than the estimated impact that he cited. Okay. So we said in the discussion paper, the potential effects on FDI of taking actions on other fronts such as perceptions of public sector corruption, are likely to be much stronger than the potential effect of lifting equity restrictions. And actually, you can eyeball it here. Yung 0.765 actually pales in comparison with the Human Capital Index, 10.85. It also pales in comparison with the Corruption Perception Index, which is yung coefficient for that is 6.053. So there you go. The results in the La Casa paper are actually in line somehow with the Parcon Santos paper by saying that corruption should be fixed first, and then actually that can be a more efficient way of attracting FDI. So yun. However, they did not highlight this because they keep saying in the congressional debates that we need the economic charter change is necessary, and parang sinukuan na nila yung other impacts like corruption and ease of doing business. Parang they're saying that wala nang pag-asa yan. Kailangan na lang talaga natin ng economic charter change and all of our problems will be solved. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so I think that's it. I don't need to repeat many of these conclusions. I think you get the gist of it. Just to show you some of the points in the rejoinder of the Foundation for Economic Freedom. They call the UPSC paper as ahistorical and devoid of context. Okay. However, when you look at their arguments, kulang pa rin. They were not able to really dissect the econometric results that have been cited repeatedly, and they rely on many case studies. However, there are fallacies along the way. For example, they said that we did a bad reading of the econometric evidence. They said that the variables like corruption perceptions are not real economic variables, and that these coefficients are not standardized. So in other words, hindi para pantay-pantay yung pagbasa dun sa coefficients for the other factors. However, in our counter rejoinder, we said that the econometric results in all the three studies are actually so-called elasticities. So in other words, they are not reliant on the exact scale or measurement of these variables. Like yung corruption perception, iba yung way ng pagsukat niya doon sa infrastructure index. It doesn't really matter because we're talking about elasticities. If there's a 1% change in X, what is the corresponding change or associated change in Y? So that applies regardless of the units that you use for these different variables. So ayun, tama po yung pagbasa namin sa econometric studies. They also said, the FEF also said, we believe that removing the restrictions is a necessary condition. But what we're saying is that, in fact, all of these factors like constitutional requirements, ease of doing business, transportation, infrastructure, etc., are all sufficient conditions. They are not necessary. There's a huge difference between a necessary condition and a sufficient condition, di ba? Ang sufficient condition, di ba, kung merong, ang sufficient condition, a necessary condition para magkaroon ng kulog, thunder, dapat ang necessary ay may lightning muna, okay? Pero, so that's an example of a necessary condition. Pag sufficient condition, umuwi ka sa bahay ng basa ang buong katawan mo, what are the various factors that could explain that, or sufficient conditions? There are many factors that could explain why you came home wet, okay? Naulanan ka or tinapunan ka ng tubig ng kapitbahay mo. Ang daming sufficient conditions to explain that. So in the same manner, there are many sufficient conditions when you want to explain the extent of foreign direct investments in a country, and equity restrictions are just one of them. So ayun, sufficient versus necessary condition, there's a crucial distinction. They also cited some case studies. For example, there supposedly has been an increase in capital spending by the entry of Dito Telecommunications. Ito yung third telco player natin after PLDT Smart and Globe, diba? So Dito Telecommunity came into the sector in the Duterte administration, and it supposedly brought in more investments in telecom. But you note that even without the constitutional changes, Dito was able to come in and actually provide that service. They also cited the entry of Starlink, yung Starlink ni Elon Musk, di ba? Kaya mabilis na internet even in the hinterlands kasing bilis na dito sa Maynila because of Starlink. However, they were actually able to go to invest here in the country because of a special permit provided by the NTC. They were considered a value-added service, and it is operated by a subsidiary of Starlink as owned by Elon Musk. So again, an example of foreign investments coming in even without changes in the constitution. And it also shows you that if you change regulations in various sectors, you will be able to bring in investments even without constitutional change. Very recently, itong Nitori, if you've been to BGC lately, so this is the biggest furniture retailer in Japan. They were able to set up business here in the Philippines quite recently in April. And in fact, it is touted by the DTI as the first big investment that came in after the passage of amendments to the Retail Trade Liberalization Act. So in other words, again, an example that you don't need charter change if you just want foreign businesses to come in and do business here. Ayan, they also said that, FEF also said that RBH 7 and 6 will provide certainty to the country's economic policy direction by giving our legislators the flexibility to create legislation. However, again, if you look at the realities of the Philippine political economy, nakita nyo nga yung exercise of power ng Congress in shutting down ABS-CBN, for example, which is an act that does not inspire confidence for prospective investors in the country, where you can see that lawmakers can easily wield power and bend the rules and do whatever they want in this country in that way. Okay, so it's not entirely encouraging. And then you open up these sectors to that kind of exercise of power that can be abused by Congress. So, I mean, it can even, what we're saying here is that economic charter change can actually bring in even more uncertainty compared to before. So, ayan, since then, the FEF has posted on social media aggressively in a bid to promote economic charter change. And one of the posts they did recently is that, sabi nila, anong kinalaman ng economic charter sa mamamayang Pilipino para makauwi na ang OFWs? So, we've reached this level of the debate kung saan wala nang econometric evidence dito. Ano lang tayo, we're just throwing out ideas even without proof, okay? And parang dangling economic charter change as a panacea to all of our economic problems. Sabi, makakauwi na ba ang OFW sa tulong ng economic chacha? Kapag pumasok ang mga magagandang trabaho, hindi na kailangan umalis ng mga Pilipino. Sa Econ Chacha, makakapasok ang foreign investments na nagdadala ng magandang trabaho at mataas na sahod. But exactly how many OFWs will be enticed to join advertising or higher education or public services? Remember, these are just the 3 things that they want to open up for foreign investments. And yet, they are painting it to be, again, the cure-all for many problems, including employment, poverty, whatever you want. Okay, and now, most recently, including OFWs coming back to the Philippines. So, ayan, yan daw yung supposed benefits of Econ Chacha. And then you have statements coming from some politicians like Senator Robin Hood Padilla, who said that, bakit utay-utay pa? Bakit hindi na lang natin sabayin yung political provisions in charter change? Okay, so this points to you the many risks associated with charter change that even if they say na, oh, Econ Chacha lang tayo, pero there's always a possibility that they will overextend it into political provisions as well, which will throw off our country and put us in more uncertainty than before. And then ito, natakpan lang nito, pero let me remove, sorry, natanggal. Pero itong si Rufus Rodriguez, so ayan, in response to the economic to the discussion paper released by UPSE professors, sabi niya, anti-poor daw kami. And we are obstructing economic progress. Hindi lang anti-poor, anti-development, anti-growth, anti-employment, and then anti-poor. Okay, so again, ganun na. I think kadesperado ang ilan para protektahan yung kanilang narratives. And this, I'm sure you think as well that this is not helping at all in improving the quality of the discourse when it comes to economic charter change. Oops, nawala ulit yung ano. Okay, so I think that's it. Let me invite you to download the UPSC discussion paper, which you can get from the UPSC website, as well as the rejoinder, the counter rejoinder that we wrote. So I guess the main conclusion is that moving forward, let's listen more to the data and push for evidence-based policies rather than policy-based evidence. I have some Rappler articles on this issue if you want to read. So I come out with an article on Rappler every Friday, and I often tackle economic charter change in those pieces. So please feel free to read them. Let me plug as well quickly my book, False Nostalgia, The Marcos Golden Age Myths and How to Debunk Them. That will soon be in its 5th printing by Ateneo University Press. And it's also available on Lazada and Shopee. And most gratifyingly, some teachers in basic ed have sent me pictures of them using the book in their Araling Panlipunan classes. So if you have the chance, please get a copy. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Salamat, Doc JC. Meron tayong time for open forum. Yung mga nasa sa Zoom ay magtaas lang ng kamay gamit ang raise hand function. So, tinatawagan ko si Dr. Rude. Nagtaas ba?
Actually, I was just applauding.
Sorry.
Sometimes I go like that, which is the deaf version of it. Let me just say that I think that a slightly more forceful way of putting JC's point is that the only possible reason for caring this much about these economically trivial amendments is, well, partly because that way I could for sure own an ice plant, because I'm not yet allowed to own an ice plant because it's a public service. But, you know, the Supreme Court could clear that up. But more to the point, and I think Robin Padilla basically spilled the beans, that people who are pushing this hard for it tend to have other objectives, including, in his suggestion, extending the term of office of local government officials from 3 years to 5 years, which of course local government officials like. But if we ask the average citizen about these changes in the political, they are very much against political changes to the Constitution. So just throwing that out there since I got accidentally called on.
Thank you. Thank you, Sir Stephen.
Jay. Hi, Prof. JC. Salamat sa presentation. May ka-clarify lang ako. Dun sa model ni La Casa, 2023, I saw when you compare dun sa another model, parang yung R squared niya relatively lower compared dun sa ibang R squared. Tama ba yung nakita ko medyo malabo kasi dun sa ano, parang nasa 0.4 lang compared to mga 0.8 dun sa ibang models. Yeah. Just wanted to check on that.
Yes, nicely spotted, Sergey. So you can see here that Sergey was referring to this row right here. So you have R squared. So this should be squared. So this one in the Parcon study is 0.83, and in La Casa is 0.439. So ano ba ibig sabihin nitong R squared? So sa ganitong klaseng econometric models po, itong R squared tells you the extent of variation in FDI that can be explained by the explanatory variables that you included. So in other words, by including in the Parcon paper, human capital index, equity index, inflation, corruption perception, all of these factors and others account for 83% of the variations in outward FDI. So in other words, they do a good job of explaining the ups and downs or the variation in outward FDI compared to the La Casa paper, which doesn't even explain half of the variations in outward FDI. So, of course, this is just one of the things you look at when you assess the validity or the soundness of econometric studies. You want a larger R squared rather than a smaller R squared. However, there are nuances to this. If you just add even more variables, R squared will necessarily increase. That's one thing you need to remember when assessing R squared. But for our purposes, we are more interested in the elasticities, in these coefficients. Kung mas malaki ito in absolute terms, then mas malaking impact niya on outward FDI. And remember, what we're doing here is comparing the relative importance of these factors. So we're not saying in the discussion paper or removing any possibility that loosening FDI restrictions will increase FDI. Kasi sinabi ng FAF, anti-FDI daw kami. So that's not true at all. We see some room for FDI restrictions to be loosened. However, what we're saying, we need to assess the costs and benefits of economic charter change. Kasi kung yung benefit lang ay ang liit pala ng epekto nito compared to ease of doing business or corruption perceptions, then we will do better, we will do well to focus more on these very difficult issues admittedly, pero they have a better impact on FDI. Yung corruption, napaka-simple actually. You don't need rocket science to understand the factors behind FDI. In countries where corruption is less, as well as in countries where there's better infrastructure, more macroeconomic stability, more human capital investments, ito yung mga masarap lagyan ng pera, okay, for your investments, rather than in a place where you don't have all of these good things. I think that's the key point. Thank you, Sir Che.
PC, Glenn, ako, Glenn here. Parang based sa mga data na available, masasabi mo ba na hindi lang siya napapanaon itong economic chacha or totally hindi na talaga natin siya kailangan?
Siguro, Glenn, we can go back to the SWS survey that I showed you earlier, kung saan there were moments in our history where there was actually a clamor for constitutional change. However, going back to the very nicely written policy paper by statement by the UP Department of Political Science, parang you need a more compelling reason for charter change, any type of charter change. Like if there's a regime change, a change in the political order, parang that's an easy way to rally people toward that cause. Pero for now, again, going back to the fact that we have actually grown kasi sinasabi, di ba, okay lang itong economic charter change para lumago yung ekonomiya natin. But when you contrast that with statements from economic managers saying that, oh, we're actually the best performing economy in the region, okay? Na ang growth natin nasa 5.6%, 6% post-pandemic, ang taas nun compared to other neighboring countries. So, so we're actually faring well if you listen to them spouting these economic statistics. So in other words, we can actually grow quite fast relative to neighboring countries even without economic charter change. So again, going back to the main issue here, which is the supposed necessity of economic charter change, we don't see it as necessary or the most important reason to pursue charter change or to improve the economy.
And mukhang given all the factors na binanggit mo kanina, so kahit umusad pala ito, the question is, will it attract talaga the investors, ba? Parang ganun.
If I may go back to this slide here, showing you yung trends of FDI. over time. This one is quite informative for me. During the Aquino administration, you can see the very big increase, or the statistic, or well, I guess this is statistically significant increase in the amount of foreign direct investments from 2010 all the way to 2017. It's almost a monotonic or steady increase. Okay, and then 27. So again, ano bang nangyari during the Aquino administration? This deserves more study, admittedly. Pero remember that there was a huge good governance campaign during that time. Yung kung walang corrupt, walang mahirap slogan and all that. So it was out in the public that we need to address corruption at the very basic level. So I guess, again, going to back to the idea of foreign direct investments, there's a psychological component to it as well. Kung saan, if you see that a country is committed to solving corruption, and in fact, corruption perceptions go down because of that show of commitment, then that is a factor that could bring in more foreign direct investments. So you can see here the significant increase during that time. And then Duterte administration, 2017, downhill na ulit siya. Okay, so parang you can almost correlate it with the administration that is in place. Okay, and then you have here 2021. There's a boost post-pandemic, and then we're on the decline again. So that in 2023, the amount of foreign direct investment is just about the same as the one in 2019 or before the pandemic. So we want these bars to be increasing more significantly. But yun, why is FDI on the decline? When you look at equity, whether it's equity or I think most of the decline actually comes from equity. Which is greenfield investments, more stakes in domestic businesses. So ito yung the blue bar signifies new foreign direct investments. Okay, and why is it on the decline recently? And remember, again, going back to the statements of the Marcos administration, di ba, nakailang foreign travel na si President Marcos. Parang dose-dose na ng foreign travels. Again, even yung Formula 1, di ba, in Singapore, they justify that by saying that, we were actually talking to people so that we can bring in investors. And supposedly, from all those trips, they were already able to attract more than 4 trillion pesos in foreign direct investment pledges. Okay? So, ang dali pala. Okay? Foreign trip travels lang pala yung katumbas ng ng trillions of investment pledges. But the keyword there will be pledges. What percent of those pledges actually came into the country and invested here in the country? They're not so transparent with this. And I'm not sure that anyone actually tracks these investment pledges and how many of them actually push through. Pero again, parang may contradictory statements coming from government. Ang dali pala ng investments from the foreign trips. Pero on the other hand, kailangan pa natin ng economic charter change para ma-boost yung investment. So, what is it really? Ano yung katotohanan? We need to interrogate that.
And lastly siguro, GC, gaano ka delikado yung kawalan ng kaalaman ng maraming Pilipino sa economic charter? Masyadong malaking substantial yung number, no?
Correct. Oo. And I hope that SWS can do more follow-up surveys on that question. Kasi, of course, how can you ask people to support economic charter change if they don't know nga much to begin with? So that doesn't really make for, or parang that weakens the push for economic charter change, that parang illusory lang yung support if they don't really know what we're talking about. Going back again, for example, dun sa 1973 Constitution, paano na-approve yun? Show of hands lang yun, di ba? Na sinong gusto ng bigas? So, taas ng kamay. E di, syempre, nung pinicturan, e di, yun na, yung proof nila that people want the 1973 Constitution. So, we don't want something like that to happen.
Yes.
Thank you, JC.
Tawagin ko muna si Sir Joseph Solis.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Dr. GC. I think yung proposal talaga na i-amend ang economic provisions, ang dapat kasi na i-amend na economic provisions talaga, yung sa Article 12, Section 2, yung exploration and extraction of natural resources At yung sa real estate at sa domestic corporations. Yan dapat talaga na i-amend ang mga provisions sa 1987 Constitution. Yung sa proposed na RBH 6 at 7, hindi talaga siya sufficient para maka-attract po tayo ng foreign direct investment. Dapat talaga yung pag-amend ng economic provisions, yung Article 12, Section 2, Article 12, Section 3, Article 12, Section 7, at Article 12, Section 10. Yung talaga dapat na i-relax ang foreign FDI ownership restrictions. Yan dapat talaga na pagtuunan ng pansin ng ating gobyerno. At personally, when it comes to foreign land ownership, panahon na talaga na payagan na i-allow ang foreigner na maging legal landowner para naman na yung foreigner na gusto mag-invest sa probinsya, hindi na kailangan na mag-asawa ng Pinay at yung Pinay na asawa, yang ilagay na pangalan sa Certificate of Land Title. Yan talaga na dapat i-amend. Kasi gusto ko ibenta yung lupa ko na minana galing sa aking mga ninuno, ibenta ko para may pang-aral po ako abroad. Gusto ko na maging ekonomista. Pero hindi na pwede ma-realize dito sa Pilipinas. At isa pa, yung sa basic education, dapat talaga na i-allow ang 100% foreign equity ownership para talaga na mag-attract po tayo ng foreign teachers, foreign educational institutions na mag-open ng bachelor degrees programs na mag-train sa ating mga Pilipino na maging teacher ng French, German at Spanish. Kasi wala po tayong manpower na para magturo sa ating mga kababayan na maging fluent sa French, maging fluent sa German, maging fluent sa Spanish para maka-migrate po sila sa Europe. Kasi ang Europe, need sila ng Pilipino na worker kasi may population aging na sila. Tayo may excess na labor surplus tayo na dapat ipadala doon sa Europe. Pero tayo sa Pilipinas, kulang po tayo ng foreign direct investment necessarily para i-invest sa mga economic sectors na hindi kaya ng Filipino-owned corporations. So, ang conclusion ko, dapat yung exploration and extraction of natural resources, ownership of private lands, at yung corporations, dapat talaga yan ang pagtuunan ng pansin na i-amend ng Congress. Para dadagsa talaga, mag-flock in sa Pilipinas yung foreign direct investment. At talaga, dapat talaga i-allow mga foreigners na maging landowner. Kung gusto ni Elon Musk na mag-establish yan ng spaceport sa SpaceX, dapat i-allow na talaga ang mga katulad ni Elon Musk na maging landowner dito sa Pilipinas. Thank you po.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Joseph, sa intervention mo. Pwede ka rin maging ekonomista, no? Kahit hindi ka pumupunta abroad, pwede ka mag-enroll sa UP School of Economics. Pwede ka mag-apply sa aming iba't ibang grad programs kung gusto mo mag-ekonomista. Pero anyway, siguro, so yun, nakakapagtaka din ano na bakit well, yun nga, kung napaka-importante nung other restrictions on land, for example, and natural resources, ay hindi ito kasama, hindi ito tinatouch on dun sa RBH 7 and 6. Ang gusto lang talaga nila baguhin, in fact, gusto lang nila maglagay ng phrase, di ba? Unless otherwise provided by law. In other words, yung Kongreso ay malayang magpatupad ng mga batas para damihan or palakihin yung hati na pwedeng makuha ng foreigners sa pagmamay-ari ng ganitong klaseng investments sa advertising, education at public services. Pero I think importanteng debate din yun na paano naman yung ibang mga restrictions like land and natural resources. Ngayon pa nga lang, natural resources, meron nang kumukuha ng natural resources natin. Pero sa West Philippine Sea naman, may mga marine resources doon. Pero I think yung sa sinabi mo na iba-ibang sektor ano like mining, dapat nating tingnan ano bang klaseng FDI ang maganda para sa Pilipinas kasi tulad ng sinabi namin sa discussion paper, hindi lahat ng FDI ay nakabubuti. In other words, wag nating i-equate na pag FDI, mabuti na yan. Kailangan natin suriin ang FDI sa sector X, okay ba yan? Sector Y, okay ba yan? Isa-isahin natin kung mabuti ba yung FDI sa bawat isang sektor. Halimbawa, between FDI investments in mining versus FDI investments in renewable energy, ano yung mas dapat nating pinopromote? Okay, I would argue na mas justifiable yung investments in renewable energy na by the way, tulad ng nabanggit ko kanina, government was already able to liberalize investments in RE by just improving yung quality ng DOE regulations even without economic charter change. Mining is quite problematic for me kasi even now we can see na without yung opening up yung mining, nakita natin yung abuse o yung pagkasira ng ating mga bundok, ating mga kagubatan sa Zambales. Yung mom ko, foster mom ko, taga Santa Cruz, Zambales, kung saan merong very aggressive na nickel mining operations. Kung saan nakikita mo, nagsisip in talaga sa mga riverbeds, etc. Iba na yung kulay ng tubig na dumadaloy sa kanilang mga bodies of water doon. So, kitang-kita ko yung talagang impact ng irresponsible mining. And that's even without yung economic charter change nga. So, just to say na kailangan nating tingnan ano yung mga klase ng FDI na kailangan natin at tingnan natin on a case-to-case basis. Yun lang po. Maraming salamat. Yes, sir.
Thank you, JC, for the explanation. I agree with you that what we need now is to fix what is wrong with the way we run our economy, not the charter change. Kasi like you said, ease of doing business, infrastructure, this will give us bigger and more significant impact in the way we do things. So I think I agree with you completely that changing the articles of that or the economic provisions is not the solution. Now, the other thing that I like is you talk about pledges. This is something that we have to look at because we have a lot of pledges, but it is the rate of conversion that we must be tracking. Okay? And this has been a part of the Board of Investments, et cetera, et cetera. There was a time that this was being tracked based on the plan of the investor, and then it is tracked by year. Because in the feasibility study, it says, year 1, I do this, year 2, I do this. But we have to track, is that guy really investing? Or binakuran lang yung investment para walang pumasok? Diba? Because there was a time, for instance, in the past that our rate of conversion was below 30%. Below 30%. So I don't know if somebody's tracking that now. How much are we really converting? Thank you.
Very much, sir. I think yung Malacanang, they were asked by some journalists kung saan ilang percent ba ng mga investment pledges yung actually pumasok so far. I think they were able to come up with a 20% statistic on that. Pero they need to be more transparent when it comes to that list kasi I mean we need to ask where are these investments exactly happening, in what sectors, in what regions, etc. So that we can really track. Pero I also agree with you completely, sir, that we really need to follow up on those investment pledges because the current narrative actually works against the push for economic charter change kasi as I said, if it's that easy to get investment pledges, then you don't really need the economic charter change. I think that's one of the more compelling and simple ways to counter the need for economic cha-cha. Thank you po.
Any more comments, question?
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Hi, this is Arnold Pedregal. First time attendee po. Marami pong Dr. JC, thank you for the very informative presentation. Quick question lang po, no? Dun sa La Casa paper, could you clarify that he excluded the the EDB and all the other factors? And may I ask was there any explanation given why he excluded them?
Thank you for that observation. As I said earlier, La Casa did not offer any justification for these modeling choices. If I were to do that replication of the study, siguro the first thing I would do is to try to replicate the Parcon paper first. Okay, using the same data set and then using the exact same variables. Kasi as I noted here, ano ba yung mga inumit ni Rutcher? Friend ko to si Rutcher. Sabi niya, ayan, rule of law, ease of doing business, and variables of infrastructure quality. Some of the most important aspects to attracting foreign direct investments. So, parang it's unjustified to exclude such important variables, and yet that's exactly what was done. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
I
that's
agree with you.
precisely po my opposition to that La Casa paper. Kung ano pa yung pinaka-importanting independent variables, they omitted it. So to compare the Parcon paper to La Casa is not valid because the other one, I think the first one is even more significant because it included those important factors, whereas the La Casa did not. And to me, if you ask me, of course, rule of law, ease of doing business, these are the major ones. You don't need economics to say that, corruption is important, right? We don't need economics to go to that conclusion, right? So I would say that I would tend to question, of course, maybe he has a valid reason, but I'd like to see how he came to that conclusion, and that if there is a way for me to go to see the actual paper, that will be best. Meron po ba tayong link to the actual paper for those two?
Yes, Arnold. I can send through Sir Leo the link to the La Casa paper so that you can check it out also. Pero yeah, it's quite questionable, and also the fact here that it excluded Singapore, Hong Kong, and Taiwan outward FDI, which, as I noted earlier, accounted for 17% not of total FDI into ASEAN. Remember that both studies were trying to explain the amount of FDIs in ASEAN 5 coming from everywhere. But why exclude these Asian tigers in the analysis? Ayun if I were to do that again, replicate first the Parcon paper and then play around with alternative specifications. Parang that will improve a lot, or parang that will make for a more compelling study. But unfortunately, the La Casa paper has been echoed repeatedly in Congress, much more than the Parcon Santos et al. Paper. And yun nga, meron pa silang mga back-of-the-envelope calculations to try to simplify it and more understandable for lawmakers. Hopefully, and then yun nga, may cherry picking that's happening. They're not really including the more important result of La Casa, which is yun nga, the greater importance of corruption perception and even human capital investments. And you might ask, why did they choose to highlight such a small, or parang a variable that has such a small coefficient in that model, 0.765? And then, it's a big contrast compared to 10.85 and 6.053. So there's some cherry picking involved, unfortunately. Thank you.
I would even go to the point of comparing the data set itself, these 700 observations. I'm not sure what is the content of these, to derive at these numbers, because otherwise you will be comparing apples to oranges between these two papers.
As far as I know, kaya naging 770 yan is that it included greater number of years in the analysis. So fewer countries but more years. So I think that's why it exceeded the Parcon study in terms of number of observations.
Okay. Yun lang po. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay na ba yan? O hindi? Ha? Bumabagsak eh. Anyway, maraming salamat, JC,
Thank you,
for
sir.
this first seminar. And I hope there'll be many more because you attract a big audience, which is what we like, no? You like an audience. I have many reactions, but I'll not. I only want to talk about the corruption variable. That's extremely important, I think. No, but already there, no, regardless of what, kinds of manipulations, econometrics is like that. You try this, you try that, but you can see it's a important variable. Okay. Now, very simple. Stop calling it perception. It's corruption. Why is it called perception? Because it's a judgment call. If you look into the background of how this index came about in the first place, right? This is the great creation of Transparency International. It's a collection of judgments of expats in the countries involved. Where do those judgments come from? Well, there are expat companies in everyone here, right? I mean, there are foreign companies, all right, based in the Philippines, in Singapore, etc., etc. These foreign companies have research companies that they deal with, who supply them with information and ask them also questions. One of those questions is, kumusta ang corruption doon? Right? And these expats who answer these questions give judgments. Are those valid? Well, they are tagaroon. I mean, they have been working in these countries for some time. They have an idea already about the state of corruption, and they judge it. That's why it's called a perception. They judge it. So you have this judgment. Now, it's culturally affected, of course, because those research companies are, of course, also Western research companies. Diba? Okay. And the expats who answer this also have cultural bond. They have certain standards about what they think is corrupt and what they think is not corrupt. So anyway, it's their judgment call. And if you're going to keep calling that perception, it would be like you have to call, for example, in the Olympics, the records, the wins or losses of the athletes, judgments rather than real accomplishments, just because they are based on judges. All right? Our guy in gymnastics, for example, why is he going to win? Well, there are a bunch of judges who will say, hi, ganon, right? Does that mean that it's just because the judges judge that way, not because of what he really did? When it comes to scoring, or for example, in boxing, scoring, you have to have judges, right? Now, TI, Transparency International, is very careful to say that this is corruption perceptions because they know that's what it's based on. But there's no other judgment except that. I mean, practical. That's going on in the world, and so that is what they use. No, but it is corruption. It's the number for corruption. I can think of another one, but it's no longer available. And this is when SWS had a project called Transparent Accountable Governance and was using this to also create similar judgments in the Philippines for about 10 years. But unfortunately, the funding eventually was ended. It was not permanent. No, it was dependent a lot on some foundation's assistance, and it ended. And we were it should have been picked up by local business. But that's another matter naman. And substantively, I would say that the big difference in Aquino 2 is the improvement, is the lessening of corruption from Arroyo. Ever since Garci, the corruption judgments of the Philippine government were terrible. And especially the office of the president. We can look that up. Since you know, kasama ka na rito, tingnan mo kung anong nangyari doon sa mga judgments na yun. Okay. And then I would say, in reality, the corruption lessened from Arroyo to Aquino 3, to Aquino 2. Now, after Aquino 2, I don't know because our own measurements were halted. But definitely from Arroyo to Aquino, that, all the grades improved. And this is not the judgments of expats, because we were asking Filipino companies to make judgments, all right? And not foreign companies, big companies, of course, right? So I think that the lessening of corruption starting in 2010, or the expected lessening of corruption starting in 2010 had a big thing to do with it. Anyway, if you'll only understand that corruption is an important factor, and it's a real factor, and never mind the perceptions business. It's real, I believe. The judgments are okay. They're not one person's judgments. There are many. There are many, hundreds of people are making these judgments. So this is not, I say parang bigla-biglang magpapalit yun. No? And TI has done a great job in creating this index by getting the cooperation of those companies to provide it with data free. Huh? Okay? That's a great organizational job of Transparency International, okay? For which they've gotten awards. Right? And it should be used more and should be investigated more, and maybe look for the underlying data so we can study it some more. Huh? But this is real corruption. Do not minimize it by saying perception. Hindi lang parang akala. Hindi lang akala. Siyempre, kailangan may titingin. Okay? Pero hindi lang isang tao yun. Marami yun. And that's properly surveyed too. It's as valid as the judgments in the Olympics. When all of those scores, especially yung mga artistic, may judges yun, yung mga ice skating, yung mga ganun. Judge din yun. Don't say it's the perception of the judges that so-and-so is better. Sa dami ng mga judges, sa marami tumitingin. And it's so well accepted and they use it, it works. And the corruption index, let's call it the corruption index. of Transparency International. Until something else better comes along, that is corruption. That is, I mean, numerically, that is corruption. That is it. Huh? The thing to do if you don't like it is to produce a different one, a better one. But until that comes along, that is the empirical corruption. That is not just a perception. In fact, if you get another one, siguro judgmental call din man. Magiging perception din. So do not water down by calling it a perception, even if Transparency International calls it CPI. That is my recommendation. Para magiging tunay eh. You keep on putting the word perception dyan eh. Parang tingin-tingin lang ng ilang tao. Hindi. That is the actual numerical corruption as best can be rated in our world today. And hats off to Transparency International for that.
Thank you, Sir Mahar. Opo. In my defense, di naman po ako yung sinabi naman, sila po nagsasabi na corruption perception. Hindi po ako ang may kasalanan. Sorry po. Ayun. Pero yeah, good point, Sir Mahar. Yung absent actual data on how I mean, there's so many forms of corruption kasi na parang it's impossible really to pin it down to a metric that captures everything. So, I would agree na yun na nga po yung yung best. Yeah, correct. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, sige po. Yeah. Yes. Opo. Yeah. Yeah.
It's based on the actual feelings, the actual knowledge of people on the ground who have dealings with government, who have, alam nila. Alam nila ang situation.
Yeah.
And so, yun talaga ang nangyayari.
Yeah.
Yun talaga. You cannot affect that. You cannot influence that by some kind of, campaign on social media. You cannot affect what those judges are going to say about the corruption in the country.
No.
It's clean. No? They're clean judgments.
Yes, sir. Opo. I would also be interested to look at your data, the one you were mentioning, yung sa Arroyo versus Aquino transition. Okay, sige po. Oh. Sige, sir. I'll look into it po. Yeah.
We said, now this is not expats. This is the local, these are the Filipino executives naman, who are also doing the same thing. Huh? And moreover, they were judging not just corruption as a whole, they were judging agency by agency. Maraming agencies. No? Ang pinakamasama dyan ang Office of the President. Obviously, because of the Garcia case.
Yeah.
And then how that improved in the time of Noy Noy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, after that, nawala. And so I'm, medyo may bad feelings ako doon sa business sector, because the business sector should have been the one to pick up the bill. Sila naman ang respondents dyan eh. And they should not have depended on foreign assistance to pick up the bill. Kami wala na kaming dyan. We had no more financial capability to expand our agenda for that particular issue.
Sige, sir. I'll look into your data, what you have from before. Thank you po. Okay.
Okay, let me just read a few more comments. In Zoom chat, We have a question from Mr. Experto Cabatana. Why was there a big switch to debt instruments as a proportion of total FDI? What are debt instruments? And finally, let me just read yung comment ni Ma'am Lydia. It seems to me that the thesis of the School of Econ team can be moved forward in two different directions toward popularization of the message for the benefit of the average Filipino. This mostly lies in the hands of mass media who are aware of the effect of message framing. And two, towards further analysis where equity index is the dependent variable and EDB, corruption, infrastructure are independent variables, to make the point you made earlier in the open forum.
Thank you, Leo. So regarding the first point, what are debt instruments? So basically, when there are existing foreign direct investments in the country and foreign entities borrow for these investments, for example, loans or through bonds, etc., issuance of bonds, etc., then these are debt instruments. Pero I haven't really explored that particular segment of FDI. Pero you would notice from the data that's actually a significant portion of much FDIs compared to, for example, new FDIs or equity FDIs and the reinvestment of earnings. So a lot of it is in debt. Yeah. And then ayan. So and then thank you po dun sa suggestion to popularize the message. I think one of my colleagues sa UPSC, si Shelo Magno, has been quite popular on TikTok and other social media. So she has been even more aggressive in pushing the message from this discussion paper. So kudos to her sa effort na yun. Yung explanatory variables behind or the possible explanations for the equity index itself, that's also quite interesting. If you put it from an explanatory variable to a dependent variable, then that will be interesting to study as well.
Thank you, Sir JC. And that's all the time we have. Yung humihingi ng recording, yes, I have all your emails. Ifo-forward ko sa inyo yung copy of this proceedings. And also yung email ni Dr. JC. So maraming salamat po ulit. Palakpakan naman natin si JC.
Thank you po, thank you.
May tradition kami dito sa kapihan na nag-group picture yung sa Zoom. So may I request everyone pa-screenshot na lang. Oo. Okay.
Maganda ng comments.
Oo. Okay. Hindi na. Oo. At bago tayo formally magtapos, tinatawagan ko si Jay Sandoval, ang aming Vice President, to present a certificate of appreciation.
Bibit-bitin ko na lang itong microphone ko rin. Okay. Dito na lang ako. Sige. So, this is a certificate of appreciation awarded to Dr. Giancarlo Punongbayan, guest speaker, in contribution as resource speaker of social weather stations, Kapihan on the statistics and econometrics of charter change, an assessment of the data used for or against economic charter change, given this 13th day of May 2024 at SWS Knowledge Center. Signed, Linda Luz Guerrero, our president, and myself. At meron pang,
Ay, wow.
Sir.
Sir, sama ka sa picture.